there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach, and I've had to come to terms with the fact that in the UK, pudding isn't creamy chocolate in a cup.
I'm Rachel, the Brit, here to remind him that if it's sweet and comes after dinner, it's a pudding. A great British favourite is spotted dick.
Oh my god.
You don't even know what a spotted dick is, do you?
That name gets me every time with the spotted dick. Jesus Christ. I don't know who came up with that, but come on. So basically we're both wired, but for different reasons. Too
Well,
much sugar.
exactly. Ready for a wild ride, because this one is definitely wild.
Yeah, honestly, between the twisted secrets, the double lives, and the unexpected turns, this case is everything you want in a true crime story. So buckle up, folks.
In early 1990s, Northern Ireland, evangelical communities like Coleraine were tightly knit, where church attendance was near mandatory.
This story follows two couples navigating the delicate balance between conviction and private desires, revealing how deeply held values clash with unspoken yearnings in a community where every gesture carries weight.
Hazel Stewart, raised in Coleraine, embodied the values of Northern Ireland's evangelical heartland, faithful and gentle and quietly devoted. She became a teacher, married Royal Ulster Constabulary Sergeant Trevor Buchanan, and built a life rooted in routine, church, and family. Trevor was modest and dependable, and their marriage was seen as stable and respectable. Hazel's grace and warmth earned deep affection, and she remained firmly within the community's strict moral boundaries. But respectability doesn't always equal contentment.
Just across town in Coleraine, Colin Howell had built an equally curated life. Originally from Portadown, he had moved to Coleraine with his wife Leslie shortly after their marriage in 1983. A successful dentist, Colin was bright, charming, and articulate. He and Leslie, an attractive and vivacious woman, seemed like a golden couple. They had 4 children and were active members of their evangelical church. Colin led Bible study groups and took part in church music events. Faith wasn't a side note, it was the organizing principle of his life, or at least of the life he projected.
Hazel and Trevor joined Coleraine Baptist Church in 1986, and it was there, at a church playgroup, that Hazel met Colin. At first, their conversations seemed innocent, two kindred spirits navigating the weight of expectation and quiet marital disappointment. Behind closed doors, Colin's marriage to Leslie was already unravelling. The sudden death of their infant son had devastated her, as she struggled with deep grief and depression. Colin grew emotionally distant and began seeking intimacy elsewhere. Over time, he convinced himself his desires weren't sinful, but divinely sanctioned. A belief he later framed in religious terms, insisting the affair was part of God's plan.
A scumbag.
Yep.
Picking up chicks at the playgroup.
I mean, so if you've lost your
Honestly.
child, your wife is struggling, you should really give it some, understanding and
Oh, he gave it some understanding. This is God's plan. That is some twisted logic, in my opinion, to think I'm just going to go cheat on my wife and everything after we just lost a child. Not cool, man. Come on.
Christian, are they?
hmm
Well, doesn't
This
it
is
say?
Ireland.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm obviously Catholic or whatever. I didn't know.
Catholic and
Yeah,
Protestants. Yeah.
yeah. Well, surely that the God's plan. I mean, I don't think infidelity is a it
Uh,
is a sin.
this is where he's rationalizing it and trying to bring it in line with his beliefs, and that's not what you do. Honestly, you don't twist the word
Yeah,
into, oh yeah, this is fine.
just to suit your own sort of wants and
Yeah,
desires.
it's lust.
Hmm,
The seven deadly
that's a
sins.
sin.
You've got lust and all that.
Yeah.
So
Horrible. Sounds horrible, man, doing that to his wife at a absolutely horrible time.
they should have been with like the church and gone to counseling and like grief counseling and stuff like that to help them through it, not run off to another woman's arms, but the woman in question, she was all for it as well. Because by the spring of 1990, Hazel and Colin's connection crossed a line. What began as shared frustrations became something physical and emotionally consuming. Howell made the first move, once telling Hazel, "I'm not having innocent thoughts about you." In their community, adultery meant social ruin, threatening family, career, reputation, and divine favor. Yet Colin and Hazel deepened their affair, justifying it as sacred and divinely ordained. For Hazel, it brought both guilt and relief. Her marriage to Trevor was cold, while with Colin she felt seen and wanted. Still, her double life weighed on her, caught between the demands of her secret and the expectations of her community.
Well, by the summer of 1990, the affair between Hazel and Colin had moved far beyond secrecy and flirtation. It wasn't just dangerous, it was consuming. That summer, Hazel became pregnant. She wasn't sure if the father was Colin or her husband, Trevor. And in their world, where divorce was unthinkable, the idea of an unplanned pregnancy conceived in betrayal was too explosive to risk exposing. Hazel and Colin made a quiet trip to London. No one knew. No one asked. There, in a private clinic far from Colloraine's watchful eyes, Hazel had an abortion. It was never spoken of in their churches, never confessed to friends. Colin later called it their blood pact, a secret that in his mind bound them together even more deeply.
So they, in religious terms, committed another sin,
Yep.
you know, in my framework.
Well, it would be even.
It's well, in my framework, I think of it, they murdering a child, just because they want to keep their secret of their affair. That's like beyond nasty to me.
Well, you've got obviously the original sin of them adultering, then you've got the sin of aborting a child, but you've also got another sin because she's fell pregnant possibly by this man out of wedlock.
Yeah. But then I would also look at, the religious pressure
Mm.
upon them. It's like if we expose ourselves to our religious community, we will possibly be shunned, families torn apart, and all of that.
Yeah, I think they definitely would be pushed aside from the community, the church community, obviously friends and family, probably if they're all, very devoted religious people, can't see them standing by their side.
Well, after the abortion, their relationship ended briefly. It only lasted a few months. Then they resumed their secret meetings, often in Castle Row Forest. When a church member spotted them, they both confessed to their spouses and their pastor. So the only reason they even came out is because one of the church members busted them smooching at the Castle Rock, or
And they got
sorry,
caught.
Castle Row Forest. Yeah, they got caught, and that was the only reason for not the baby, not
But they probably didn't know
you know,
about that.
they had all this stuff that they've been doing that's wrong. And the only reason they even came forward is because they got busted.
Yeah.
You know?
But then they obviously not would have come out and said about the child.
But Leslie, who had just given birth to her fourth child, later attempted suicide and left behind a note. Trevor was devastated by Hazel's betrayal, but still wanted to save their marriage.
Well, for 4 months, both couples attended the church counselling, but the affair didn't end. Colin would later describe their connection as addictive. By 1991, it had endured guilt, exposure, and emotional fallout. What it couldn't withstand was the pressure of secrecy. Colin, whose moral reasoning had grown increasingly self serving, began to justify unthinkable actions as divinely permitted. He believed that their union was ordained by God and that anything preventing it, including their spouses, had to be removed.
Isn't that the first commandment? Thou shalt not kill. He's twisting it again.
Yep.
He's just like, yep.
He's trying to find every excuse to do as he pleases, to justify.
Yeah, he's twisting the word and twisting in the scriptures and commandments to suit his own agenda to keep with Hazel. But in May of 1991, Leslie's father died suddenly while visiting her home. Her grief, combined with the betrayal she had suffered, would become a central part of Colin's cover story. So he would claim that she had taken her own life, overwhelmed by sorrow and humiliation. That same month, Colin met Hazel twice to plan the murders, once to explain the method, and again to give her the sedatives for Trevor. The plan was chillingly methodical: carbon monoxide poisoning, staged as a double suicide. Colin would kill Leslie first, then help Hazel kill Trevor. Clean, bloodless, believable.
Hazel didn't devise the plan, but she didn't resist it either. She later claimed that she was emotionally manipulated, spiritually conflicted, and afraid. Afraid Colin would go through with it without her. Afraid he might turn on her. But she also admitted wanting freedom from the lies, from the fear, and toward a future with him. In some part of her, she believed it might work, that it might solve something.
She had all opportunity to go no, and then
Yeah, I
go to
mean,
the go to the police, go tell somebody, tell the church. She had all opportunities, but I think he was a little bit of a dominating force, like persuasive. He had all these religious explanations, ordained. We're meant to be together. It's God's will. All this stuff. I think it was just maybe overwhelming
mm,
and a serious thing to talk about. And if he's all serious, that's could also be a bit scary.
yeah, some people can easily manipulate people, you know. I mean, women, they're quite vulnerable to an extent, more vulnerable than a man most of the time.
Neither Hazel nor Colin fit the archetype of impulsive killers. They were respected, embedded in the community, and outwardly devout. That's what made their actions so disturbing. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was the product of long term moral erosion by people skilled at performing virtue while dismantling it behind closed doors.
Well, by 1991, Hazel and Colin's affair had already been exposed. They confessed, sought counselling, and promised to end it. But when it resumed, they did so under intense scrutiny from their church, families, and community. The pressure to avoid being caught again was overwhelming, and the longer they hid, the more fragile and dangerous their situation became.
Colin's faith twisted into self righteous exceptionalism. He believed God had chosen him to act beyond conventional morality, even to justify adultery, deception, and murder. Hazel, however, was conflicted, feeling manipulated and torn between her faith and fear of scandal. Colin convinced her that this was the only way to protect their children and be together, promising it would be quick and natural.
The plan took weeks to prepare, during which they maintained flawless public lives. Hazel teaching and caring for her children, Colin practicing dentistry and preaching. Their ability to compartmentalize revealed this was no crime of passion, but one of deliberate calculation.
Fear drove them, fear of divorce, judgment, disgrace, in a community where appearing godly was paramount.
By May 1991, the tension behind Hazel and Colin's carefully kept facades erupted into a chilling, calculated crime.
On the 18th of May, Colin carried out the first part of the plan. Using his knowledge of chemicals and the mechanics of his own practice, he prepared a lethal dose of sleeping tablets and devised a way to introduce carbon monoxide gas into their home. An apparently painless and bloodless method he believed would avoid suspicion.
Leslie, already weakened emotionally from years of depression after the loss of their infant son, was vulnerable. After convincing Leslie to take sleeping tablets, he held the hose close to her face to poison her with carbon monoxide. Leslie woke up, cried out for her eldest son, Matthew, and struggled, but Colin forcibly restrained her until she had died.
Meanwhile, Hazel was preparing for the second, even more harrowing act. Trevor had no idea what awaited him. Hazel gave Trevor the sleeping tablets that Colin had provided, intending to make him unconscious. After Trevor fell asleep, Colin arrived at the house and carried out the final step, manually holding the hosepipe to Trevor's face to administer the fatal carbon monoxide gas. But Trevor woke up. Colin had to manually hold the hosepipe to his face to complete the murder.
Both deaths were about 30 minutes to 1 hour apart, designed to cement the appearance of a tragic double suicide born from personal crises. Colin had put Leslie in the boot of his car before going to Hazel's to murder Trevor. After they dressed Trevor, they took them to another location and staged the scene.
Both bodies were discovered in a fume-filled car parked in the garage of Leslie Howell's father's house in Castle Rock. Leslie's body was found slumped in the back seat with a set of family photos scattered beside her. Trevor was in the front seat, his leg hanging out of the open driver's door, and also had the window open all the way. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, just the eerie stillness of a double suicide.
The wider community was stunned. Suicide was virtually unheard of in this devout, close knit town. Whispers of foul play rippled through the congregation, yet within days, formal mourning proceeded. Funerals at St. Patrick's Church, hymns echoing down narrow lanes, while many quietly questioned whether the tragedy was it as it appeared.
Beneath the surface, subtle unease began to stir. While the community largely accepted the official suicide narrative, some quietly questioned details that didn't quite fit. In a close knit place like Coleraine, small inconsistencies sparked whispers, unspoken doubts that hinted at a deeper hidden truth.
The police launched their investigation, assuming suicide, and forensic evidence seemed to back it up. Sleeping tablets were found in both victims. Carbon monoxide levels pointed to poisoning, and there were no signs of forced entry or violence. But some officers weren't convinced. Off duty detective David Green, one of the first on the scene, later said, and I quote, "I was just unhappy with the scene and really became suspicious. Obviously, the suspicion fell on Mr. Howell."
Hardened detectives and just they get a feeling or they just like that's not right or that doesn't add up. That's not what usually you after so many years, they're just like, this is how it usually goes, and this is what we see now. And it doesn't quite fit the pattern of like a double suicide or someone committing suicide.
Well, yeah, because you've got two different forms of causing yourself suicide. I mean, if they're having sleeping tablets, why did they not just take sleeping tablets, so many that they wouldn't wake up? Or so it's kind of like two different ways of, maybe they just done both in order to.
I think they might have said, well, they took the sleeping tablets to just kind of put themselves to sleep and make it easier, and then let the nature take its course with the carbon monoxide. You know what I'm saying? That could have
maybe
been their rationale.
maybe they were using the carbon monoxide as a backup to, make sure that they were
Yeah,
fully dead.
and maybe the police were just thinking
Yeah.
kind of rationalizing different aspects of it. But what nobody expected was that those early, quiet doubts would simply fade, tucked away beneath grief and ritual, while the official story held firm in the aftermath. Colin and Hazel slipped back into their public roles. He returned to dentistry and delivered sermons on faith and redemption. She kept teaching, smiling through the glances and whispers. Outwardly, they were grieving spouses. Privately, they were partners in murder.
But their secret bound them, but it also isolated them. Colin's sermons turned more self justifying, hinting at an inner struggle. Hazel's composure sometimes cracked. In a tight knit evangelical community, small shifts didn't go unnoticed. But the police had closed the case. Forensic had supported suicide. No further questions were asked. What lingered, though, was the tension between appearances and reality, guilt and survival. They had pulled off the perfect crime, and now they had to live with it.
They got away with it. That's it. The police were like, well, we might have some doubts here and there, but
That's the
that's,
thing. If the evidence just points to, forensics is just saying, yep, this is open and shut, suicide, closing the case, they're going to be very much thinking, yeah, we've got away with it.
yeah, that detective, gosh, he had it.
Mm.
He had it, but then maybe his colleagues were like, no, man, I like, this is what it is. Let's just close it because this just seems what it is. And it maybe overrid some of them instincts, unfortunately.
But that's the thing, when the forensic just isn't there, you can't take your gut feeling to a court and try and prosecute. But even when that came back that, it was suicide, the officer probably still felt, "No, this isn't quite right." But without the evidence to prove otherwise, what can they do?
Well, things moved on.
Yeah.
In 1997, and remarried again, this time to Kylie Jorgensen, a young woman from the United States, from New York. Their relationship had developed quickly, and Colin, now free from his first marriage, framed it as a redemptive new chapter. To patients and fellow church members, he was a man of resilience, a widower who had survived a devastating loss and found peace again through love and faith. But the narrative had cracks.
But in late summer of 1998, either August or September, Colin confessed everything to Kylie. Later, she said that she was feeding their first child in the lounge of their home outside Castle Rock when he told her what really happened to Leslie and Trevor. She agreed to keep the secret for the children and perhaps for the marriage. Hazel Stewart relocated to Castle Rock, a coastal village in County Londonderry, continued teaching, attending church, and raising her children, all while maintaining a discreet presence. Over time, her bond with Colin faded, their connection reduced to infrequent messages and deliberate distance.
But they go through all of that, murder their spouses to be together, and in the end they don't stay together.
Yep.
That is insane. All them moral justifications, all this shit,
Yep.
like, well, we're free now. I don't have to be with you. That's crazy.
Well, you would think that they'd stay together to try to, obviously she was worried right in the beginning when before they even murdered that, when he was manipulating her, she had concerns that he might turn on her. So you would think that they would both stay together so that they knew that neither of each other would turn on, you know.
But he said, this is ordained by God Almighty. We're meant, this is prophecy. This is God's plan. And then he's just like, that's enough of that.
Shocking.
See you later. I'm going to go marry an American and run off because we got away with it.
I couldn't imagine getting into a relationship with somebody not knowing any of this background to what he's done or she's done. Yeah,
Because in the end, if he just wanted to get out of his marriage with Leslie and she was already troubled and she was already, depressed and they lost their child and he could have just done that same thing just to her and
yeah,
that's it. And by the looks of it, would have got away with it.
yeah, I agree.
That's just adding someone else into it and killing them to like their spouse to be with them, but then not be with them. That's insanity. Insanity. But and then he admits it. And then he admits it to his
To
new
his new
wife.
wife.
But this is where I go back to
I mean, you just would not, would you? Why? Why would you tell somebody?
you got away with it, man. Like, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Like, why is he, but this is where I come back to the control and the dominance and all of that. If I admitted to you, hey, me and this other lady, we were together and we murdered our spouses. We
I would.
murdered them.
You would be gone. No kid. It don't matter whether we got kids or not. You'd be out the door. There's no way I would be living with a murderer. Good God.
That's what I mean. Like any person would be like, no, I'm police. Hello.
She was probably too. It's one of those. You fear leaving and saying, informing the police that this is what he's told you, but then you're also going to fear staying because you just think, oh my God, is he going to kill me?
And what proof does she have?
There you go.
There's no evidence. It's just a what is it? The confession
Hmm.
is hearsay.
Yeah, yeah, she can't prove it, but I sure as hell wouldn't stay. I would get my kids right out of there.
Say bye bye now. But dominance.
Yeah.
I think he's got control. So. Yet the events of May 1991 had not disappeared. The further Colin moved from that night, the more unsteady he became. In his second marriage, unsettling behaviors surfaced. He made veiled references to the murders, hinted at terrible sins, then abruptly withdrew or denied he having said anything at all. These erratic moments left Kylie confused and frightened. Colin's inner life, once governed by evangelical conviction, had become increasingly disturbed. Religious obsession and guilt formed a destructive loop. He interpreted ordinary setbacks as punishment from God.
In 2007, Glenn's eldest son, Matthew, died in a tragic fall from a fourth floor apartment in Russia. He was just 22. The loss shattered the family. Colin was consumed by grief and convinced the death was divine retribution. The spiral deepened in the aftermath. His faith took on a punitive dimension, and his mental state deteriorated further.
The hits just keep on coming, though. Nothing like the loss of a child, but then came financial ruin. In 2008, Colin became embroiled in a bizarre and ultimately disastrous scheme involving Yamashita's gold.
Yamashitas?
I totally butchered that one. Yeah,
That's all right.
Yamashita's gold.
Yamashitas.
Well, that is a legendary World War II treasure, supposedly buried in the Philippines. Lured by promises of untold riches, he poured in everything he had, convinced he'd walk away with £20 million. Instead, he lost £350,000, nearly all of his assets, on worthless trinkets and elaborate forgeries. He even liquidated his shares in two dental practices to finance the scam, dragging friends and acquaintances into the delusion. It was a crushing blow. By the end of that year, both emotionally and financially, Colin Howell was ruined.
What is this dude playing at?
He
Jesus,
got scammed.
what an idiot.
Couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Yep.
If what the first thing that came into my mind was that multi-marketing, like multi-level marketing.
They're like
Hey guys,
pyramid
if you
schemes.
yeah, if you get in on this, man, we can make loads of money. You just put in a little, like maybe like Ponzi schemes as
Yeah.
well. Just like if someone come to me and said, "Hey, man, can you dump like 10 grand into this gold that's in the Philippines?" I'd be like, get stuffed.
Blair, I don't think so.
That's crazy.
Theory made. It doesn't sound like he was quite smart. Meanwhile, Hazel continued living a life that outwardly remained untouched, but Colin became increasingly resentful and came to view her as unrepentant, a woman untouched by guilt, unshaken by consequences. He had once believed that they shared something spiritual, something destined. Now he saw her as cold. That perceived lack of remorse became for him in his own kind of betrayal. Why is he fucking worrying about Hazel? And now he's thinking back to what they did.
Well, gosh, I think he's thinking about all of his stuff. He's financially ruined, family, loss and all that. And she's fine. She's compartmentalized probably and just put that away as far down as she could and carried on and she's not all ruined like him.
Yeah, like moved on from it and was able to sort of carry on, pick herself up from that and actually live a life. He's obviously hit rock bottom.
Well, and then also he's looking at her going, she's just fine, isn't she? Look at, look at me, I'm all messed up and maybe that divine stuff's coming out again
Yeah,
of why is she not being punished like
yeah,
me?
yeah. Well, yeah, because he see everything that was happening to him was, retribution for the murder that he committed with her. So, well, murders. And if she's not been too affected by it, then yeah, he's gonna start resenting her for the Lord, not bloody
Well, so he's feeling all these feelings and by early of January of 2009, the dam finally broke. Colin confessed everything to senior members of his church, laying out the murders in chilling detail. They urged him to go to the authorities. He hesitated, but the weight of the secret had become unbearable, and I think also the weight of all the stuff going on in his life as well. So a few weeks later, he walked into Ballymoney. Is that how you say it?
I guess so. I'm not Irish, so I wouldn't know.
A few weeks later, he walked into Ballymoney police station and asked to speak to detectives. And I'm sorry to all the Irish folks out there if I got that wrong. I try my best to get pronunciations and stuff, like when we go to
I'm
Wales for
sure you'll
one of
be forgiven.
well, I don't want to do the long I'll tell everybody, look up The longest town name in Wales. I can't do it. I will never be able to do it, but it is
I would
absolutely,
never be able to say that.
it is crazy. It is so crazy. But anyways, sorry.
On January 30th, 2009, Colin gave a full and detailed account of the murders. Investigators were flawed. The deaths of Leslie and Trevor had been long considered tragic suicides. Their families had mourned, the community had moved on. There had been no warning signs, no reopenings, no suspicions that reached the level of official action. Now Colin's confession dismantled all of that.
I think if I was the detective, I'd been like, "What? You what now? That's long closed. Like, what are you talking about?" And
Mm.
would just be absolutely taken aback
Yep.
that he's just like they got away with it, and he's just
Why
come
would you
in.
even why would you come and say that you done it when, that would have been going through their mind was, "What the hell are you telling us this now? Why didn't you just, tell us in the beginning?"
Oh man, that's to be that detective to just hear all that, and you're just like, "Holy shit, really?"
I think after some, he must have been riddled with guilt. He's going through life having, financial ruin, everything's just going wrong in his life. So he's obviously at the point where he's thinking, "Well, I need to confess to the police because, life's just not gonna get better unless I do."
Well, yeah. So he goes into everything. He admitted to plotting and executing both killings and named Hazel as an active and willing accomplice. His story included precise, chilling details, the affair, the planning, the way he had suffocated Leslie before staging her body in the fume-filled garage, and then how Hazel had drugged Trevor and allowed Colin access to kill him in his sleep, the misdirection at the scene, the manipulation of suicide notes, the entire charade.
Well, crucially, Colin revealed details only that the true perpetrators could know, making his confession undeniable. The reopened investigation didn't just confirm the truth behind the long closed deaths, it exposed the deep psychological, spiritual, and relational damage left by a murder pact concealed in plain sight. Justice was finally going to be in motion.
Police swiftly revisited the case, reviewing old files and forensic evidence. They faced the daunting task of untangling a 2-decade old mystery complicated by time and the initial misclassification of the deaths.
Meanwhile, Hazel Stewart came under immediate scrutiny. During interviews with detectives, her responses were marked by defensiveness and inconsistencies. She denied the allegations at first, portraying herself as a peripheral figure swept up by Colin's manipulation. However, as police pressed for further, contradictions emerged, eroding her credibility.
Shockwaves they rippled through Castle Rock and beyond. Hazel was not just a teacher or church member, she was a trusted figure in the community, known for her dedication to Sunday school and her calm demeanor. To learn she might be involved in a cold blooded double murder shook the residents to their core. But the police, they were looking into everything, like we said, and what emerged was a picture of missed opportunities, procedural oversights, and a forensic narrative that had never quite actually added up. At the time, the pathology findings appeared to support the story. Toxicology confirmed the presence of sleeping tablets, and there were no signs of forced entry.
But Trevor Buchanan's body had trauma that had gone unexplained. Mourners at his wake had noticed blood at the back of his head, later confirmed in post mortem images. His face, particularly around the nose and mouth, showed signs of pressure, suggesting he may have struggled as he was gassed. His body positioning was also strange. Slumped awkwardly in the driver's seat with one leg hanging out of the car door, an unlikely posture for someone intending to die peacefully. Also, the driver's window was fully open, odd choice for people supposedly trying to die by carbon monoxide.
Leslie's positioning raised doubts as well. She was seated upright, but unnaturally so, more as if placed than settled. The hosepipe used to feed the exhaust fumes into the vehicle was closely connected and kinked. These overlooked details, taken together, painted a different picture, not a mutual act of despair, but a staged scene. Signs of trauma, physical manipulation, and staging errors pointed to something far more sinister.
The pathologists hadn't missed everything. but they hadn't asked the right questions. And crucially, no one pushed hard enough to see past what they were told, that these were suicides. The timeline verification became a key focus. Colin's detailed confession included precise descriptions of the sequence of events on the night of the murders, when and how each victim was killed, the preparation involved, and the manipulation of the scene to simulate suicide. Investigators cross checked this against phone records, witness statements, and forensic data, discovering contradictions in the original timeline that supported Colin's versions of events.
Armed with this new evidence and bolstered by Colin's confession, the police swiftly moved to apprehend Hazel. On February 3rd, 2010, she was arrested and formally charged with 2 counts of murder. Initially, she denied everything. Then she shifted her story, claiming that she had been coerced, that Colin had threatened her, that she had feared for her children and acted out of self preservation. But the narrative didn't hold. The evidence and Colin's testimony contradicted her claims.
During questioning, Hazel's demeanour fluctuated between defiance and vulnerability. She maintained that she had been manipulated by Colin, that her involvement was limited, and that the fear had kept her silent for all those years. Yet investigators noted her evasiveness and inconsistencies in recounting events, casting the doubt on her narrative.
Well, it had been almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think trying to remember everything that even something that traumatic, you're not going to remember everything to the letter. And then and this is, we've brought it up again and again with his manipulation, his dominance, how he can just he coerced his second wife into not ratting on him. That was in 98.
Yeah.
And it took till 2009, 11 years before it even came out. So she sat with that. How much of a control does he have over someone who, to not get them to run to the police?
I think also with sort of circumstances of people committing murder and stuff, sometimes they would block it out,
Yeah,
not intentionally most of the time. I think they just kind of, you hear of people not,
like they black out.
no, not like a blackout, but just like they tell themselves like, "Oh, this didn't happen," and they believe their reality is not actually a reality.
Okay, so like creating a false memory of
Yeah,
what happened.
like because of the trauma that she probably was, in the beginning, would have found it really difficult actually probably to know what they've done and, but then focusing on moving forward with her life.
Yeah, I mean, just like she needed to move on, and they look like they got away with it, and they're just like, "Yep, cool, yep, all right, let's just move on," and then they drifted apart. And that was that. She just compartmentalized it. But the reopened investigation revealed just how deeply religious and social pressures had shaped Hazel and Colin's actions and their silence. In a community obsessed with appearances, the fear of scandal and ostracism made confession unthinkable. That fear had allowed a double murder to remain hidden for nearly 2 decades.
As the case returned to public view, it became a media sensation, exposing cracks in the facade of religious respectability. It forced uncomfortable questions about hypocrisy, coercion, and the quiet power of shame in tightly knit faith communities.
With Colin's confession, forensic reanalysis, and Hazel's contradictory statements, the case against them quickly solidified. What emerged was a chilling reminder even in places that prize virtue, darkness can thrive behind closed doors.
In the spring of 2011, the small town of Coleraine found itself thrust into the glare of a courtroom drama few could have imagined. The trial of Hazel Stewart for the murders of her husband Trevor and Colin's wife Leslie opened amid intense local and national media interest. Colin himself, already convicted and serving a life sentence for his role in the killings, took the stand as a key prosecution witness.
Colin's testimony was chillingly detailed. Calm and composed, he recounted the events of that fateful night, laying bare the planning and execution of the murders. Crucially, he painted Hazel not as a reluctant or coerced participant, but as an active collaborator, Fully aware of the gravity and implications of her actions, Colin described how the two had meticulously arranged the alibis, the timing, and the staged scene of the double suicide, emphasizing Hazel's involvement at every step.
Prosecution's case hinged on demonstrating Hazel's willing participation. They argued that the evidence from the forensic re examinations to telephone records and witness statements confirmed Hazel's knowledge and complicity. The careful coordination and long term concealment of the crime scene, they insisted, could only have occurred with her full cooperation. They also highlighted Hazel's behaviour in the years following the murders, her remarriage, continued church involvement, and efforts to maintain a veneer of normalcy as indicative of a person who was not simply a victim, but an accomplice who concealed the truth for decades.
In response, Hazel's defense team presented a starkly different narrative. They portrayed her as a woman trapped in an abusive dynamic, psychologically dominated by Colin's charisma and control. Hazel herself described him as, quote, obsessed, calculating, controlling, and very manipulative, while portraying herself as, quote, soft, weak, vulnerable, and easy prey. According to her defense, Howell's influence was so overwhelming that her consent was effectively negated.
Well, Hazel claimed that she had been coerced, threatened emotionally and spiritually, and she lacked the freedom or strength to resist his plans. In a later interview, she recalled a chilling moment when Colin said, and I quote, all our problems would be over if these two were dead, before he laughed, dismissing it as a joke. When you're having an affair, you don't really know a person, she added. It's all spiced by the thrill of illicit meetings.
Trial featured testimony from expert witnesses specializing in coercive control, domestic abuse, and psychological manipulation, concepts that Hazel's own descriptions eerily echoed. Her portrayal of herself as vulnerable and Colin as obsessive lent weight to the idea that she was emotionally manipulated and deeply enmeshed in a power imbalance. These experts explained how prolonged exposure to controlling relationships can distort an individual's perception of agency, making resistance difficult and fostering a sense of entrapment. They argued that Hazel's outward calm masked an inner turmoil and submission born from years of manipulation.
Well, the prosecution countered with their own psychologists, who challenged the extent of Hazel's claimed victimhood. Prosecutor Philip Henry Casey argued that the new psychiatric evidence presented by Stewart's defense was a minority opinion without any support, emphasizing that it contradicted the expert opinions of all previous doctors who had examined her closer to the time of the killings. He further contended that the concept of coercive control was not properly explored at the time of Stewart's trial and that the new evidence was not available at that time, questioning the timing and relevance of the fresh psychiatric reports.
The jury members were presented with the stark clash of perspectives. Was Hazel a cold, calculating conspirator, or a frightened woman caught in an impossible situation? Throughout the proceedings, observers noted Hazel's demeanor stoic, composed, almost emotionless. Her calm presence in court was interpreted variously as strength, detachment, or even chillingly lack of remorse. It, your defense is always like, what I've seen in other ones, they go, don't react, don't react, don't, but that could also go against you. If you're not upset at some things or show emotion in some things, then it makes it look like you're just a stone cold killer.
But either way, you're not going to win either way, are you? Because, you could be seen as if you're showing emotions, are people going to think, oh, depending on what type of emotion you're showing?
Or like I say, you're faking it.
Exactly. But then if you sit, on the other hand, you sit there and you don't show nothing at all, then they think that you don't care and that you're not feeling guilty about what you've done.
Double edged sword.
After weeks of emotional testimony and evidence presentation, the trial of Hazel Stewart reached its climax. The jury retired to consider their verdict, tasked with untangling a deeply complicated case that went beyond the usual black and white of criminal justice.
The jury returned after 7 hours of deliberation, and the decision was clear. Hazel Stewart was found guilty on both counts of murder. The jury had accepted the prosecution's argument that she was more than a coerced bystander, that she had willingly participated in the planning and execution of the murders. That's 7 hours is not a long time.
Yeah, 7 it's not long, not long. I've seen shorter, but that is not long for
Yeah, it wasn't as short as old Buck Ruxton of like 91 minutes, but
exactly, the last case.
just one, like they just sat back there for one day
Yeah.
and was like, yeah, that's, that's not a lot of time to really sit and talk about it and go through, especially like the psychological stuff.
Mm.
That doesn't feel like long enough to me.
Judge Anthony Hart, acknowledging the gravity of Hazel Stewart's crimes and the profound betrayal involved, imposed a life imprisonment sentence with a minimum term of 18 years before eligibility for parole. In delivering the sentence, the judge emphasised the deep breach of trust at the heart of the case.
It's as an American, it's funny to me when you get a whole life sentence and a minimum of 18 years. When over there we're like, nah,
Yeah.
that whole life is whole life. You die in prison,
Not over here, it's not.
and especially like a double murder like that. Yeah, you're gone. That's life.
Yeah, we don't get over here. It's so weak over here. It's unreal.
I don't think it's like weak. I mean, I think some things in America they get wrong with sentencing. Like not everybody should get a whole life sentence,
Hmm.
and some do get it when they shouldn't. But it's just making that judgment, which is tough.
Well, in my view, if you kill somebody, life, you've took their life, so it should be life. That's
Yeah,
just my
true.
view.
Especially a premeditated murder like this.
Well, yeah, that's even worse if it was an accident.
Yeah, or just like a crime of passion.
Mm,
You think of a guy rolls in, sees his wife with another man or whatever, gets the gun and starts blasting. He's just out of his brain.
mm.
Who determines whether, like, yeah, he shouldn't have done it, no question. But so furious and so out of his mind with rage and shit, he just,
Yeah, that's where it comes in with the mitigating factors, doesn't it? So, you know, it's not clear cut on a lot of cases.
yeah. Judd Hart said, quote, "This was a cold, calculated, and premeditated crime that shattered not only the victims' families, but the wider community's sense of trust and faith. You betrayed the very principles you were meant to uphold as a respected member of your church and society. Your actions showed a profound disregard for human life and decency. Justice demands a sentence that reflects the gravity of this betrayal."
Well, the courtroom was tense but subdued. Hazel, as throughout the trial, maintained a composed and unreadable expression, neither pleading for mercy nor openly displaying remorse. This stoicism sparked mixed reactions amongst the observers and the public alike.
Media outlets highlighted the shocking betrayal at the heart of the case. The BBC ran headlines of Hazel being found guilty of murder, while the Guardian's coverage framed the story as a profound crisis of faith and trust in Coleraine. Broadcasters and print journalists alike emphasized the stark contrast between Stewart's church-going image and the calculated violence she was accused of.
While public opinion was divided, many were shocked, struggling to reconcile the image of a kindly Sunday school teacher with the cold calculation of murder, seeing Hazel as manipulative and dangerous. Others sympathised, viewing her as a victim of coercive control by Colin, raising questions about free will and responsibility.
Well, and also the trial highlighted societal struggles to define culpability in cases involving psychological abuse or alleged psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And it was challenging the traditional views of victim and perpetrator. While Hazel's sentence was legally just, moral debates lingered. The case exposed hidden darkness beneath respectability and faith, serving as a cautionary tale about secrecy, guilt, and the tragic consequences of love entwined with deception and violence.
In the years following her 2011 conviction, Hazel Stewart launched several appeals challenging her sentence, primarily citing coercive control and psychological abuse by Colin. Her first appeal in January 2013 was dismissed by the Court of Appeal. A subsequent appeal in 2015, arguing procedural issues, was also rejected.
In March of 2016, Stewart applied to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, or the CCRC, for a review of her conviction, but the commission found no grounds to refer the case back to the court, noting that the absence of new expert psychiatric evidence at the time.
Most recently, in May 2025, Stewart sought to introduce fresh psychiatric evidence alleging depression, post traumatic stress disorder, and coercive control. The Court of Appeal firmly rejected this application, emphasising the need for finality in the justice process and pointing out that these claims were presented too late and contradicted earlier expert opinions. Lady Chief Justice Dame Siobhan Keegan stated that the new evidence was insufficient to overturn the original verdict or sentence.
Well, Siobhan had none of it and shut her down. But throughout these appeals, the courts acknowledged that abuse and coercion were factors, but consistently upheld that they did not absolve Stewart of responsibility for the murders. Hazel remains imprisoned, serving a minimum of 18 years, a stark reminder that the legal system stands on shared culpability despite claims of coercion.
Well, the Irish Times reported that in May 2011, Colin pleaded guilty to 9 counts of indecent assault involving 4 female patients at his dental surgery. Offences committed over several years while the victims were sedated. Following his conviction, he was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. As a consequence of his criminal actions, Colin was stripped of his National Health Service pension. This marked a dramatic fall from grace for the former dentist and devout church member, underscoring the severe breach of trust he had committed.
So he was even bigger of a scumbag.
By the sounds of it, yeah.
How did he reconcile that one?
Well,
Oh, it's just divine
God's plan.
intervention. I can grope women and assault them because they're sedated and nobody's gonna know. There's no victim here. What a fucking scumbag!
Absolutely disgusting.
You put trust, in doctors and stuff like that, and dentists, like when they put you to sleep and they're gonna take care of you
Yeah.
because you are at your most vulnerable, and he's in there doing that. That is fucking vile. What a vile scumbag.
It's definitely an unforgivable act, basically, violating people like that.
Yeah. Well, I hope he never gets out ever.
Yeah.
Well, other than our own reaction of that just then, the public reaction to the case evolved beyond shock and sensational headlines. As the years passed, deeper conversations emerged about religious hypocrisy, the contrast between the couple's outward piety and the brutal crimes they committed. Faith communities grappled with the uncomfortable questions about blind trust, unquestioned authority, and the dangers of moral absolutism when combined with secrecy.
The story of Hazel and Colin is often told as one of deceit and betrayal, but at its heart are 2 lives lost far too soon. Leslie and Trevor weren't just victims of murder, they were victims of trust, of manipulation, of people who should have loved them the most. For years, their deaths were written off as tragedy. They deserved the truth and they deserved justice. Maybe the real lesson isn't just about the killers who wore masks so well, but about the silence that let them do it for so long.
This story leaves us with a difficult question, not just about guilt, but about silence. When does obedience become complicity? And in communities built on trust, who dares to doubt it? Well, that was a crazy story.
Those, yeah, interesting. And, I mean, setting out where they have an affair with each other, decide to murder their partners to be together, I'm guessing, and they don't even stay together. And then
Yeah.
then they break up and his life tanked. It just tanked completely. Obviously jealous that she was doing all right and wasn't affected by what had happened.
Yeah, like we said, it's the people that should love you the most turned on them.
The ones that took their lives
And they were using their faith and
to justify.
to justify it, to make it right in their minds, and that's in the religious sense, it's perverting the word. It's perverting the, God's word and the Bible and all that. They were going against everything they believed.
Well, they almost obviously got away with. Well, they did get away with it for many years, but thankfully, justice did prevail.
Yeah, thankfully. And May he rot forever. I still have some questions about like the manipulation because it also extended to his second wife.
Yeah,
That's like that's crazy. You can just see it move between the two of them, and you're just like, okay, well she was coerced,
yeah.
and then you see the same sort of patterns. Like who keeps all that secret for over a decade? You know, like
I
or
definitely
stays.
I definitely think that there's some truth in what she's saying about being manipulated, but she could have said no. She didn't have to go along with it.
She could have went to the church elders and said, "This is what's going on. Well, I made a mistake. We did all this affair stuff, but he's chatting about killing people,
Yeah,
and that we I need help."
yeah.
You know,
I
but
mean, it
sometimes I'll go back to like people who are with domestic violence.
yeah.
You know, they don't feel like there's a way out. You know, and maybe that's another form of control that he had over her. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of it more in cases nowadays. You do hear more about coercive control and stuff. So it's possible that she was coerced by him, but she still took part, and in jail she is as well. So
And well, and she kept it secret for all that time as well, even after she got away from him.
yeah, exactly. She didn't then go to the police and say, "Oh, he made us do this," and please, like, I just can't live with myself without.
But then she was also trapped because then she would go to jail as well, and she didn't, you know, who wants to go to jail?
Yeah, true. I wouldn't.
Well, anyways, that was the Sunday school murders. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, unsettled you, or raised questions, we want to hear from you. True crime is never just about what happened, it's about what it reveals. So please follow us. Also, give us a like, a comment, and give us 5 stars. It really helps with the whole algorithm thingy. Find us at Murder Most British on TikTok and Instagram, and MMB Podcast on Facebook.
We have a link tree for everywhere you can follow us down in the doobly doo below. So until next time, stay safe and stay curious.